There are a few alcohols that you need to know by their common names. It's actually 4. This alcohol, which is 2-propanol by the IUPAC system, its common name is isopropyl alcohol. Or isopropanol. This is because it's an alcohol with the isopropyl group. This is rubbing alcohol, what you would buy at the store. Along the same lines, we're going to call this tert-butyl alcohol. The small alcohol, which is ethanol by the IUPAC system, is often referred to as ethyl alcohol. As a very common solvent, and that's also the alcohol that's present in alcoholic drinks. And then last but not least, this alcohol, which looks very much like phenol, but it has 1 extra carbon. This is called benzyl alcohol. This right there is the benzyl group, so that's where that name comes from. So those are the 4 common alcohols names that you need to memorize. That's not too many. The next thing that we're going to talk about is boiling point. Alcohols have very high boiling points. This is due to the OH group and the ability of the molecule to hydrogen bond. In some situations, this makes alcohols a really good solvent because you can get them pretty hot without having to worry about them boiling out of the container. Alcohols aren't always great solvents because sometimes they're reactive. It just kind of depends on what you're doing. But sometimes having the high boiling point really makes alcohols a useful solvent. So here are 4 compounds. We're going to compare their boiling points just for the sake of giving you some perspective on how high their boiling point is. This is propane. It has a boiling point of -42. This is a 3-carbon ether. It's going to have a higher boiling point than propane, in part because it has a higher molecular weight. It's got 1 extra oxygen in there, and the mass makes it a little higher, and also because the molecule is polar. Propane has, just London forces in it. There isn't any polarity. This molecule is polar, so we would expect it to have a higher boiling point, and its boiling point, in fact, is 7 degrees Celsius, so that's pretty high relative to propane. If we move the oxygen from the inside of the carbon chain to the outside of the carbon chain and have an alcohol, 1-propanol, these 2 molecules have the exact same molecular weight. They're both 3 carbons, 1 oxygen, and 8 hydrogens. The boiling point of the alcohol is 97 degrees. So you can see that's a huge change in boiling point, and that has nothing to do with mass because the mass is identical of these 2. So like I said, sometimes that's really useful in the lab. Also in the lab, we want to consider the solubility of alcohols. And in general, as a rule of thumb, alcohols that have more than 8 carbons are insoluble in water, even though they have an OH group, which is polar. This is because even though you do have the polar OH group, if you have more than 8 carbons on the alcohol, it has such a large tail, I guess is the word that we use, is a large area of the molecule that's nonpolar, that big huge carbon chain. It's all greasy and organic and not polar, and there's the huge greasy nonpolar tail of the alcohol kind of overrides any polarity that you get out of the OH group. So the molecule in general becomes nonpolar. The fewer the carbon atoms you have on an alcohol, the more soluble it is in water. So if we look at a few alcohols, for example, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbon chain, 4 carbon chain. I lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon chain. 9 carbon chain. For all of these alcohols, the one that will be the most soluble in water is the littlest one. This just means that we're going to be able to dissolve more of this alcohol than the other 3 in water. A larger quantity will actually go in. This guy over here, because it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 carbons, it's not going to be soluble at all in water. Again, even though it does have a very polar hydroxyl group on it, all of these carbons is this big, huge region of nonpolarity on the molecule, overrides the polarity of the OH group and makes the molecule as a whole nonpolar. Little tiny alcohols like methanol and ethanol, we say that they're miscible in water, and that just means that you can dissolve as much as you want in water. There's no limit to its solubility. So for this section 11.1, you can do Skill Builder 13.1 and problems 13, 1, 2, 30, and 32, and they're all on nomenclature, practicing the IUPAC naming and stuff that we did on Friday. In your study questions for these sections, for this section is, what are alcohols and phenols? How do you name alcohols? What are the 4 common names of alcohols? Why do alcohols have high boiling points? And last but not least, explain the solubility of alcohols.